Hello, the doc is in, and I've had to record this video like 3 times, and you know what? It's blowing mine. But anyway, if you don't care about my little mini rant, skip ahead, and today we'll be talking about Hakari's domain expansion, his curse technique, well, possible ideas for what his curse technique could be, and what's going on with his curse energy aura thing. I don't know if there's like an exact name for that, but yeah, there's curse energy aura. But yeah, trying to record this video, making me angry, blah blah blah. But yeah, that's it for the mini rant. Anyway, let's get right into it. Jujutsu Kaisen, there's gonna be spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen chapters 183 and I guess forward, but not exactly because the next chapter hasn't even come out yet. But it's supposed to come out this weekend. I actually already seen the spoilers for it, and it seems like quite the banger, not gonna cap. But that's neither here nor there. So, Hakari's domain expansion, quite the interesting ability. Has a lot of, seems to have a lot of stuff going on with it. A lot of details. Had a whole page just with details and instructions. And even as you go through the chapter, you could be very reasonably still confused about, what exactly is going on with this thing. And today, as a doctor with a PhD, I plan to use my big doctor brain to explain this to you. Now, if you play any gacha games, if you don't know what that is, just look it up. But basically, think like Genshin Impact, Battle Cats is another example. I can't really think of all the other games like that. But basically, any game where to get characters, you gotta go into the pool and you gotta put in whatever currency they have, and then you roll for a possibility to get one of these many characters, hopefully the really good ones, like say 5 stars or the ubers, super rares, blah 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 blah, that sort of thing. If you know that, then in essence that is kind of what is going on with his domain. But if you don't know what that is, then think of it like a slots machine. And let me break it down, the important bits and what are non-important bits. So there are 2 different sections to Hakari's domain. There's the fluff, or the non-important section, and the contextual plot important section. Plot important basically just refers to the idea that this section of the information provided is important and integral for you to understand how it applies for the fight at hand, because obviously you're usually only going to be using this in a fight. And then the fluff portion is basically, you can ignore that. You could literally have all this stuff deleted and it not really significantly mess with your understanding of the domain. So to get into let's just break it down as it comes along. So first off, we have the numbers. You got the 1, 2, 3, 4 to 7, and you got the characters that go along with each, and they got the little characterization. All that's fluff. To be fair, all that's fluff. Kind of doesn't matter. The only part that really matters to this section is that if it shows up that 3 of the same person or number or whatever is on at the very end of, let's say, the roll, that means Hakari got a jackpot, ergo he gets a bonus, ergo he's going to be stronger going forward in the fight as long as he's in his domain. Outside of that, everything else is fluff. So you don't really need to know who the characters are. You don't even really need to know what number is there necessarily. I mean, unless it's explained that each number combination, well, not number combination, but let's say you get 3 2s and that's a jackpot. 3 2s gives a different bonus than, let's say, 3 7s, unless that's explained, which it hasn't been. Then even the numbers kind of doesn't matter. You just need to know if it's 3 of the same number or person, that means it's a jackpot, which is good for Hakari. Anything else is just not a jackpot, which is the only part that really matters. Okay, so that's an example of fluff and plot. Plot, 3 of the same number is good. That's all you really, and 3 of the same number is good. Anything else is bad. Everything else related to that, fluff. Moving on, we say the general core, let's say rotation of this is basically you come into the main room, which we could say is the storeroom if you're thinking like a gacha game, right? So he does his roll. The roll is done with the ball, and then it shows up, and then the door shows up to kind of represent like the chances of him getting a jackpot. All right, we'll touch on that in a second, but that is let's say the normal stage is prior to you rolling, and then the whole scenery, the scene that plays out, represents the moment before the results of the roll are shown. So let's say you're in Genshin Impact. I know you have like the crystals things that come out, and like sometimes they can show up in different colors and everything. We'll say pressing the button to activate the roll are the balls. That's when he throws the ball. The door is basically the crystals. The different colored crystals kind of represent like, oh, based on this little animation, you can kind of say like, okay, I'm gonna get an epic this time, or I'm only gonna get rares this time, or I might get a legendary in this one. That's what the door represents. Door basically just says, oh, this is a good sign. And the ball, similar thing, it just says this is a good sign for you to get a jackpot. And to a certain degree, the scenery also is just like a third step to that, in the sense that it just represents like, oh, you have a good shot for getting a jackpot. There's a lot of things that happen that represent you're going to be more likely to get jackpot. But with that being said, all those things lie in the fluff category, because directly speaking, I never said, and as the explanation of the domain expansion didn't say, technically not a single one of those things actually represent an increase in chance of getting a jackpot. In essence, what they basically say is like, oh, if we're saying that your roll was already predetermined, this just says, oh, be excited because you're more likely to have a jackpot, or vice versa, depending on if it's gold or green or red in the middle, etc. That's all that means. But dramatically, it doesn't necessarily represent a increase in chance. So you as a reader kind of don't need to worry about what color the door or ball is, because it doesn't directly affect the chance of Hakari winning. And from my understanding, outside of the door like almost maybe closing down on someone, or the ball hitting someone in the face, it doesn't even play a role in the fight necessarily. It just shows activation of his domain expansion. Well, it represents activation of his technique in the domain expansion, so to say. So in essence, scenery, the balls, the doors, fluff. Things that aren't fluff. So we'll say the normal stage to scenery to jackpot, that is not fluff, because that represents progression of his technique. And when the scene comes to a close, that means that he's going to find out whether he's getting a jackpot or not getting a jackpot. If there's a inclusion of a increased probability or any type of like bonus that represents a plot progression part of the domain, because that would represent that Hakari is more likely to get more powerful quicker, or he's more likely to get more jackpots, etc., etc. Those things matter. But outside of that, that's kind of it for the domain. It really is relatively straightforward. And from my understanding of what other people have said about the domain as they've tried to figure it out, and what I've just been able to glean, pretty much, if you understand slots or have ever played or seen someone play on a pachinko machine, especially one that's themed, then you will pretty much perfectly understand this, because a lot of the stuff that goes on with this domain honestly doesn't matter. Like, even when you're reading the chapter, if you think about what I've told you, which is basically that the door, the ball don't really matter outside of like kind of representing like, oh, he's more likely to get a chance or not more likely to get a chance this time around, this roll around, and you ignore the actual play out of the scene in a necessary sense, and you ignore like, oh, who the guy is and what the number is. If you just ignore all those things and just kind of pay attention to like, okay, this is just them fighting, and then by the end of it he finds out, oh, I got a jackpot, or oh, I didn't get a jackpot, then you perfectly understand what's going on here. Like, you honestly don't need to be concerned about the fluff portion of this domain expansion play out. And that's pretty much it for the domain. It really isn't that complicated when you just can separate like, okay, important, not important. Once you separate those things, it's like, okay, all the non-important stuff, actually you're just, allowed the romance portion of it. But if you're just looking at the numbers of it, it's like, okay, I got it. And yeah, I hope that was helpful for you understanding the domain expansion. It's definitely helpful for me. It made my life way easier. Going from there, if we went to extrapolate upon Hakari's curse technique based on that, I would argue likely his curse technique would pretty much just be subject to would be him being subject to only being able to use his doors and the ball as modes of attack. And the reason why I say that is because during his fight with his brief scuffle, let's say, against Yuji, he used the doors as an attack, and I mean we didn't see him throw the ball, but presumably the ball also can physically hit other sorcerers, or else literally his whole domain is just, let's say, just strong doors, which seems not domain. His whole technique is just strong doors, which kind of would seem pointless. I don't think the idea of like the jackpots would be doable in real time. So I feel like if those things are the only things that are a part of his actual technique, then that would be sensible, and it would kind of be like a logical progression of like, oh, his technique is just him using the things that make a pachinko machine, and his domain expansion is him running and being a part of an actual pachinko machine. And my logical thought process of this situation. As for his cursed energy aura, I'm stealing this theory. I can't remember who I'm stealing this theory from, but I stole this theory from somebody. It's definitely something that was suggested, and my understanding of it is that his cursed energy aura effectively is kind of similar to how Yuji has his divergent fist, in that, think of it like a domain expansion is not the same thing as a simple domain, because anyone can learn a simple domain, from my understanding of the situation. But a simple domain can be learned, while a domain expansion is person specific. What Hakari does with his cursed aura can be learned just the same way his divergent fist can be learned, and it may be just a nature of habit from Hakari, like how Yuji's divergent fist was a force of habit from not having good control over his aura. So I think that he, at least at this point, probably actively makes his aura like that to cause a different form of damage or trip up his enemies when he fights them, and the fact that they'll like notice it and kind of like maybe pay more attention to it, or maybe it makes it easier to get damage off on enemies, so on and so forth. We don't really know, but I imagine that's likely why his energy is like that during the course of his fights, and would also be why his aura probably has nothing to really do with his curse technique or domain in any particular manner, and it's just like a person, him, not even person specific, but like a learned technique for him to enact whenever he's going against another sorcerer or so on, or curse. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the chapter. Well, for Hakari's cursed explanation, so let's say. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you disliked the video, leave a dislike. Comment if you have any thoughts on what I explained, or have any ideas that may, assist what I'm trying to say, or maybe refute some points I have. Do either one. And if you liked the video and / the channel, or me personally, then drop a subscription. That'd be pretty cool. And thank you once again for watching the video, and the doc is out. Peace.